Hello, Read 581. The purpose of this screencast is to walk you through your first assignment, which is the assessment chart. As a reminder, this will be completed weeks 2 and 3 as a way for you to organize information, reflect on it, and for me to give you feedback in case you need to make any mid-course corrections before completing your initial assessment report, which is due the end of week 4. As you know, all of the intervention is going to be planned off of these assessment results. So it's very important that you give the right assessments, that you are analyzing them to a high level and are making appropriate decisions for your student. So let's take a look at the sample I created based off of a student that I work with. So at the top is my name, the student's name, grade level. Please make sure the grade level is right there so I can reference that. Across the top, the column headers are the assessment. So you should include the name of it and the citation and APA. The data, so this would include quantitative statistics as well as any qualitative information. Some of the qualitative data might also be presented in the strengths or needs section. And then lastly is the intervention decision. So because you found out this or this, what does this mean for your intervention session? So by the end of week 4 and the end of your assessing, you should have very concrete focus areas to start with that you're going to then make into your goal areas so that you know where to go with your intervention. Then on the left side, the rows we have are just each of those key areas of reading. So we have the affective domain, phonemic awareness, word recognition out of context, then word recognition in context, fluency, comprehension, vocabulary, spelling, and then writing. So let me quickly take you through the work I did. And in the week 2 screencast, I also talk about kind of how I came up with and my plan for intervention, assessment, how that evolved for my student. But my first session was January 26th. I wanted to really focus on the affective domain. So at that time I did an interest attitude interview. It's called an interest attitude interview. I believe it's in the resource folder. The source is unknown. I, retrieved this from somewhere. Who knows where? I know it was from a text of sorts, but it's been a long time ago. So the source of this is unknown, unfortunately. The reading interest survey is the Scholastic one. I also did the motivation to read profile, the revised version, the 2013 version, and then I did a teacher-created parent interview form. So then what I did is I went through and I included, what I found out about the student here. Her interests, here's what I found out about her opinions of school. Something notable she commented on was that, she thinks she'd be a better reader if she didn't doze off during reading. So I did a lot of, informal interviewing her on what that means. And it sounds like as she's reading, she kind of gets distracted and will even tell herself, Hope, get back on track, pay attention to what you're reading. So, I'm wondering how engaged she is with the text she's reading, if she has strategies and things for monitoring. So I noted that over here. Strengths, she had a lot of varied interests. She's able to list specific interests for reading, is self-aware, knows what she likes, doesn't like. I talk here about the dozing off comment. She doesn't have a favorite author, and also English is her least favorite subject. So some ideas I had already is utilizing games because she does like playing games and plays with her family. She's competitive. And to look at how she's monitoring and utilizing those fix-up strategies. Also being really intentional about the texts I select for her so that they are interesting and she does have, some motivation to read. She's really into World War II, mystery, detective stories, also looking for other texts by this author. She's been assigned the book Detectives in Togas for her English class. She's like that. I know this author does have other publications as well. One thing I forgot to tell you too is with this template, As I was typing into it, I don't love the formatting. I'm not married to this format. The columns aren't very wide, which kind of makes it awkward sometimes for reporting. So if you find a better way to report this same information, feel free to, modify and improve upon this template. Just make sure that you have the assessment cited, the data, strength, need, intervention, decision. And yeah, again, I'm happy to welcome other versions of this form. MRP, here is the quantitative data. We see self-concept is lower than value of reading, which impacted the overall. So strength is the value of reading. I indicated questions she gave 4s, and then over here for self-confidence, self-concept, only one of the 10 questions did she give a 4. So I'm kind of bringing in more of the specifics about how the student responded. And it was interesting because I noticed the trend. So that's what you want to do, is think about, what questions are they giving a 1 to or a 2 to, or which questions are they giving the most positive response. But the lowest scoring questions were both regarding social aspects of reading. So, how do you read in comparison to your peers? So clearly, she places a lot of weight on how her peers perform compared to herself. So that was something interesting to note. Over here for my intervention decisions, I really want to make sure she's feeling successful because self-concept is lower, and then work with her to set achievable incremental goals to help build her confidence. The parent interview data, you can read through this, but basically it just corroborated a lot of the data from the previous assessments. Phonemic awareness was not relevant to give to this student, and so you might have that. She is a 6th grade student. You'll see from her, right away I knew from the word list that she was able to decode text at a middle school level. So she's beyond, the phonemic awareness. So I skip that. And if you decide to skip an assessment, we want to really be efficient with our time and not give them all of the assessments, but only the ones you need to give them. But make sure you state a reason as to why you did not give that assessment. So for word recognition, out of context, I didn't give sight words because those were not an issue on the word list given or in context of the QRI. So I just looked at the QRI 6 word list. She scored independent at 4th grade. That's where I started. 5th grade independent, 6th grade independent, upper middle school. She missed 3, falling in the instructional level. It was interesting. The words she missed were infrared, nebula, inevitable. So I was kind of wondering if that was a vocabulary issue. So that could be something to work on for intervention, but not necessarily a priority. I do want to make sure I praise her for, reading word lists at an upper middle school level, 2 grades above her current grade, because that is phenomenal. And I think it would be important to hear that she is a proficient reader because she has low self-concept. All right, in regard to word recognition in context, I looked at the QRI passages and I actually gave 4 different ones. I started with the upper middle school level and did part 1, which I found out was actually unfamiliar. It's recommended that you start with a familiar narrative passage, which I didn't do. I chose not to follow that advice. It actually went okay. She ended up scoring independent on that, but QRI says start with a familiar narrative. I then gave I did part 2 of the immigration assessment, but she read that one silently. So I did upper middle school part 1 orally, upper middle school part 2 silently, because I wanted to check the read alouds on that, or the think alouds on that. And then that was on February 7th. And then on the next session I did with her, which was February 16th, I did the grade 6 assessments, a narrative and an expository with think alouds there. So what did I learn from the QRI passages in regard to word recognition and context? Well, all of this information, very important. What's the level? What's the title of the passage? What's the text type? What's the level of familiarity? What was the date given? She only had 3 miscues on this upper middle school level, and only 1 was a meaning-changing miscue. Instead of Armenian, she said American. So obviously American's a more familiar word to her, didn't understand that this was not about America. She had 2 omissions, but they preserved the meaning and the syntax, and then even had 2 self-corrections. So from this, I can calculate the error ratio, the self-correction ratio, the total accuracy, which helped me determine her total accuracy was 98.8. So this is definitely at her independent level. Now you might be saying, how do I compute these things? And that's why I included this PowerPoint is one I've used before that just has tips for oral reading level analysis, and it gives you the breakdown by word recognition level. And then it also, in here, I have slides on how to compute oral reading accuracy percentage, as well as the error ratio and the self-correction ratio. So we'll talk more about this in week 3 as well as when more of the analysis is happening. But that information is in that document for you to use. Then when I did the grade 6 the next week, this was familiar, it was narrative. Probably should have started with this one, but again, she did fine on the last one. She had 4 miscues, only 1 meaning changing miscue again. One of them was an omission, 2 were insertions, that and the. And then she substituted was for wasn't, so that was the meaning changing miscue. No self-corrections this time. So obviously self-correction ratio was 0. Again, 98.8% total accuracy. This was independent level. So what I found out, word recognition, she has really high accuracy and precision. The miscues, for the most part, they all maintained syntax, but didn't, there were those 2 meaning changer ones. There really wasn't a need noted here. So word recognition will not be a focus of intervention, and I want to praise her for that fact. All right, moving on to fluency. Words per minute, words correct per minute, you can pull from the QRI, and that's going to be your measure of fluency. You can then take that and compare it to Hasbrook and Tyndall's rubric, which gives you norms for oral reading fluency, but it only goes up to grade 8, unfortunately. So what you want to do is look at the level of the text. So first I gave her a grade 8 text, so I'm looking here to see how her words per minute compares to these percentiles. And then I gave her a grade 6, so I was looking here. So use the grade of the text and not the student, and then you can get your percentile. So for the upper middle school, she had a 25th percentile, whereas for the 6th grade, she had a 35th percentile. So that one had a faster rate. So I'm thinking this is definitely familiar, easier for her to read, little less complex of a text. So I did fine, and then I also checked Rosinski's multi-dimensional fluency scale. So I have that here for you too, where you just give them a score. So she got a 3 and a 4, and then a 3 and a 4 for that. And so I just have that reported as a 14 out of 16, and you're looking for a 10 or higher. If I wanted to, I could break this down by each of the components of the fluency scale. But I did find, her reading is slower, which she's probably picking up on that. And she tells me, she doesn't read as fast as her peers, and it's hard for her. So I do feel like she could benefit from some things that would help her with automaticity and recognizing words quicker. But I want to be really careful that I don't overemphasize rate, because her comprehension was phenomenal. She had 90 to 100% for her comprehension scores for all 4 of the passages. So, I don't want to push her to read so fast that she's, it's impacting her understanding of the text. And that's the ultimate goal of reading, not reading fast. So somehow I need to teach her that it doesn't really matter how fast you read as long as you understand what you're reading. But at the same time, I kind of want to bolster her confidence by helping her to read quicker. And how do you do that? Through wide reading and frequent reading for enjoyment, which she doesn't like to do. So that's kind of another challenge I'm facing. All right, let's look at comprehension from the QRI passages. I can pull retell, which is literal comprehension, as well as response to explicit questioning and implicit questions. And then also I did do the think aloud. So for the upper middle school, all of her think alouds were paraphrasing the text. Then I did 6th grade, and she utilized some different strategies, but I also then modeled it. So I'm wondering if she kind of copied my modeling. What I found here was overall comprehension is very strong. There were some misunderstandings, especially on the upper middle school level text. So even though She did score independent per the comprehension. You know, she got a 90%, which is independent on an unfamiliar text, which is awesome. You know, that she really is pulling from that text to understand it. You know, I wasn't entirely satisfied with the think alouds happening. They were all really at the literal level. She isn't thinking about text at the interpretive or higher levels of cognition. She had a few misunderstanding of nuances like streets paved of gold and patchworks. You know, some of those metaphors were lost on her. So I kind of want to work on metacognition, I can kind of pronounce that funny, and getting her to read to a deeper level of understanding, because I think that might help her enjoyment of what she's reading. If she's just like reading and trying to understand and not really making these connections or, you know, doing any of those things that would bring more enjoyment. All right, in regard to vocabulary, I actually took a look at her classroom-based assessment because she is assessed on vocabulary every other week, which is a large part of her English score, and her mom really wants her to get an A in English. So I was like, okay, well, let's see why she isn't getting an A in English, because she can read to a upper middle school level. So I took a look at the classroom-based assessments, and I was a little horrified because you know, the first 6 questions were matching a character's name to the character trait, which is kind of low level. The next 5 questions were true, false statements about the book, and they're all text-based questions. So, you know, really like detail questions. And then the last 9 questions were matching vocabulary terms to their definition, and this is what her English grade is based on. So, you know, I would like to see more application and higher levels of learning happening, but I'm not the teacher and I'm not the one making those decisions. But that was really informative to see. And I could see right away that I really needed to help her with vocabulary because she, you know, was able to memorize most of the 20 words given for the week, but she missed 2 of 9, which was 77%. So that really hurt her score. So one easy way I identified to address this is by teaching her the subjective approach to vocabulary, or SAFE method, which I did in the next session. And then the next week she got 100% on the vocabulary part. And I believe it's because she developed, you know, a higher level of understanding of that term. So, you know, if you're just matching a term to a definition, that's a really low level of vocabulary understanding. Do I think you could then use it in productive vocabulary and speech and writing? Probably not. So the SAVE method not only helps you develop more concrete associations with that term, and representations of that term, but it's going to help you because you have a deeper connection to the term. You're going to have a better understanding of it. All right, and then lastly, I gave her the Words Their Way spelling inventory. I started with the elementary spelling inventory just to kind of see how that went. And she did really well on this. She had 21 out of 25 words correct, 57 out of 62 features, overall 78 out of 87 scored in the final stage. I didn't get a lot of information from this. I saw bases and roots is where she needed instruction, but it didn't give me a lot of information because, you know, it is for grades 1 through 6, and she's kind of, you know, hit the ceiling on this assessment. So for my next step, I need to administer the upper level spelling assessment. So then I did that, and I definitely found, you know, affixes. So here is where there's a definite need. Even in complex consonants, D, G, E, K, N, needed some help there. So this really gave me more information for instruction. And although by scoring in the late affixes stage, she is on grade level, you know, I want her to do better in this area. So I'm definitely going to incorporate some more or some word study focus. So, you know, if I had to summarize the focus areas for this student, it would be definitely self-concept, word study as mentioned, deeper levels of comprehension, and then, you know, helping with rate as well. So those are kind of the goal areas that emerged from the assessments given. As you see, I didn't give any writing assessment. So here I have the note I need to assess still, and you would want to do a better job and actually list what assessments you're going to be giving. So you'll notice on the rubric that's something you're going to get scored on is that you have listed what assessments are planned for the next session. So definitely take a look at this rubric. This is what I will be using to score your assignment. It's out of 18 points. So do you have a citation of the assessment? Do you have a plan for what you're giving, what you're going to give week 3, week 4 if needed? How relevant are the assessments? If you have a 6th grader, is there a need for phonemic awareness? Is there a need for phonics or high frequency words? Data. Do you have data listed? Is it accurate? Is it appropriate? Strengths and needs. You should have strengths and needs based on the data. So, when you say something like comprehension is strong, in parentheses, you should back that up. Students scored 90 to 100% on all 4 assessments. That data piece supports your conclusion. So don't just be making broad conclusions without having the data to back it. Data-based decision making. And then lastly, your intervention decision. So do you have an intervention decision listed for each assessment result? And is it a rational assessment choice? And this is what I'm really going to be looking at, your analysis of the data, and that you're able to go from that data to making decisions for your intervention sessions, and that you're not wasting time on phonemic awareness because they couldn't segment into phonemes, but they're a 6th grader and they haven't done that in so long, and now they're reading meaningful phrases, so that's like a step back for them. We just want to make sure you're not wasting time on your assessments and turning up poor results that then you're trying to integrate into your intervention sessions. So hopefully this was helpful for you. Oopsie daisy, don't want that. If you have any questions on this assignment, definitely let me know, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results with your student. Good luck to you.